Hey, what's happening? Hey, y'all get ready for the We Talking Fatherhood show, hosted by Warren West, owner of I Love Life, co-hosted by LaVon Wesley, director of Project Game, Thomas Washington, president of Fathers Collaborative Council of Western PA, Melvin L., director of Coalition for Father and Families, Dante Works, owner of House of Veterans, Super Bowl champion Mike Logan, owner of Purpose Vision, and Brandon Phillips with Pittsburgh Public School Community Outreach. We talking fatherhood, we making moves. Ooh, yeah. You see us busting these moves. Right. We got a whole lot to gain and we ain't got nothing to lose. Yeah, we done all took losses, now we just get W.
Welcome to the We Talking Fatherhood show. I'm your host, Warren West. Co-hosting with me today to my right, got Mr. Works, got Brandon Phillips. To my left, I got LaVon Wesley, and our special guest, Pastor Isaac Compton of Tried Stone Baptist Church in Rankin, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Welcome back to the show, and we talking fatherhood. As usual, you know, we want to start our conversations off just talking about some real life things. And today, I decided to pitch some questions, or have my guys pitch some questions to each other, so we could just kind of gauge what type of mindsets that each of us have. So, fellas, if anybody has any questions about fatherhood that's on their mind, that's on their heart, before we really start diving into our conversation today, what we got?
I'm ready to dive in.
Let's dive in, Mr. Works. What we got?
So I think today we wanted to kind of talk about our first experience with racism, and what that looked like for us as young men, and then how we can tie that to being a father and raising your son or daughter, on how to address that when it becomes their reality. If it does, if it doesn't, cool. But what was your first experience like with racism that you can remember?
One of the things that, we were talking off camera, is one of the things that I remember is that the class of '93 in Penn Hills, it was the first class that had African American studies at Penn Hills. I remember it. It was a big deal. The classes prior to it fought for it and asked for it, and never really came to fruition until class of '93. And I thought that was, at the time it was, we were excited about it, but at the time it was strange. Like, all these years, 1993 was the first time an established high school had African American studies. And I thought, there's something's going on. That's when I first started opening my eyes. I had some uncles who started talking to me about what's going on in the community. And so that's when I learned. That's when it first kind of hit me, kind of like, they're not teaching us the same things.
Right.
And so that's when it hit for me.
For me, it's funny, I was in Penn Hills as well. Don't know what's going on, but Penn Hills, it was predominantly, white back in the day when my mother went there. And she was part of the first black class at Penn Hills. And she just told me that, and which was a pretty dope connection, that I ended up graduating from there. But also, one of my first experiences just recognizing racism was in the schools. And so, when I left Imani, which was a predominantly black school, which was pretty much all black teachers, black students, and then I went to Penn Hills, and I was just wondering why, even with putting my best foot forward, why I wasn't moving forward, or why we weren't looked at in a different light. And it was there was a few instances where I would turn in work, or I would walk down the hall and people would look at me and I would wonder why. But then I always reflected back to some of the lessons my dad used to teach me, just about how it used to be, and how those things are still permeate. They're just undercover. And so him teaching me about who I was and my race allowed me to kind of recognize that thing. Yeah. So I didn't beat myself up too bad, because I knew it wasn't me. But it was one of those things, once you recognize it, because it's different when people talk about it, but once it happens to you, now you feel it, and now you say, hey, I have to do whatever I can to teach him this point, right? And so that was one of my first experiences dealing with racism, but then also having a fight in me too. Like just not laying down for people treating me any type of way, because again, I had a household, my dad was kind of pouring into me who I was. So, you know, it definitely matured me a little bit, and you know, and we had to grow from it. So, Brandon, what about you?
You know, one of my earliest recollections of what I will identify as racism was in elementary school. In 5th grade, students would leave, and black students would never leave. They would leave once a week. And I was trying to figure out, why do they get to leave? Why I don't get to leave? Some of my, you know, smartest peers who happen to be African American, they weren't able to leave. And then I found out, oh, those students are going to gifted. And it hit me. And so even later on down the road, some of those students who were the most intelligent, graduated at the top of our class, never had an opportunity to leave. And when we look at, you know, the disparities of the number of students who are identified as gifted, having gifted IEPs, black versus white, there's significant differences in the numbers. And I do believe, you know, times have changed, and we might be trending in a better direction. However, the idea of measuring intellect too, I believe, will shift in the future. And it's my belief that moving forward, we'll be able to identify other markers that identify students as being gifted. And so I do believe and trust that more of us, more students of color, will be identified. And so it was kind of shocking, you know, that as I got older, I found out, like, that's what that was about.
So it wasn't that you got the gifted students, black students didn't exist. You just didn't get the opportunity.
And I didn't see him gone. I mean, I don't have a recollection of any black student, you know, being in the gifted program in my elementary school. I mean, that elementary school has since it's closed down, but it just didn't go.
So what did that do to you? Like, did it, once you realized it, did you question yourself? Like, am I gifted?
Am I gifted? Do I really get this?
Right, do I really got the gift?
I think for a while, however, I'll say that by the time I hit 9th grade, I recognized that no matter what outside forces may sort of come against me, I do have a responsibility of doing my due diligence to put my best foot forward. And I say 9th grade because that was a crossroad for me in many regards. I never played organized sports as a child. However, I got to Penn Hills too. I went to Penn Hills, and I got to Lennon. And so, you know, everybody started playing sports, and all my friends played football. So I said, I'm gonna try it out. Didn't particularly care for football, but I did like wrestling. I liked the physicality of the sport and the independence, and I also enjoyed track. So I stuck with those. And so I realized in those sports, I mean, they were all sort of independent sports, except for maybe relay on track. Like, you get out of what you put into, you know, your practice, your studies, just your own sort of self-development. And that stuck with me from that point forward. And even at a point in college, you know, I realized I got on academic probation during my sophomore year. And so kind of had a sort of a phase in my life where I sort of questioned myself, like, wow, like, what am I doing? Made it all the way to college. College is gone. And so, again, I realized, you know, one of the things that my mother would always do is send me cards of encouragement saying, I know you can get on the dean's list. You can get at least a 3.0. And so shout out to my mother for, you know, being encouraging me and saying you can do it. So eventually I got on the dean's list, and when I made the dean's list, I didn't even really think anything of it, right? So you earn a 3.5 GPA, you're in college. I did it right after I had been on academic probation. But it really came to reality when State Representative Tony DeLuca sent me a letter, you know, saying like, hey, we just want to recognize you as a resident of Penn Hills. You know, you made the dean's list. And I was like, oh, that must be kind of a big deal. So needless to say, you know, that point forward, nothing but 3.5s and above. And so as a father, though, now I tell my son, and it's funny that we bring this up because my son just got a report card and he earned, you know, straight A's for the first time. And I was like, wow, we have to celebrate, brother. I said, I never did it in my life. He said, what about college? I said, man, I mean, I'm talking about what you're doing. Like, I never did what you're doing. And so I'm going to honor that and we're going to celebrate. And so, you know, we're going to get pizza. We celebrated a little bit last weekend. And so I think what we have to do as fathers is, one, reinforce when our children do positive things, and when they do outstanding things, like really make a big deal out of it. Celebrate it amongst family, share it with as many people as you can. and encourage them to maybe break through areas they may not see themselves in, such as gifted. Like if they find out about a gifted program or they want to know about gifted, they tell them, yeah, we can get you tested. I mean, it's that simple as a parent. Yeah. So it's also sort of knowing, and I believe my mother knew, but I also believe my mother knew, her child, and she probably recognized that early on. I wasn't really trying to focus on school totally, but as I grew older, she saw the potential in me. My father too, even as an adult, would say like, man, you amaze me. I'm doing things that he'd say like, I don't even know how you do it, half the stuff you do, but I say, be that example and be an encouragement.
For sure.
For sure.
Vaughn, what you got, man? What's your first experiences that you recollect with discrimination and racism?
I could say, thinking back as an adult, I can recognize them as being, being involved with racism and discrimination. But back then, I didn't know. Just being a kid from Mon Valley area, bred off Duquesne, and traveling outside of those areas and seeing how people treated us. So if we went to Century 3 Mall at the time when I was a kid, you see how you were treated when you and 3 of your homies caught the bus out there and you're by yourself, or whatever the case may be. We didn't pay attention to it as much, but now I would say those would be the first time that I could say I experienced some type of discrimination when we would travel outside of our neighborhoods as kids, just looking to really just have a good time for real. And then the first time I could say it really hit me in the face is when I went to college. I went to Edinburgh University. I played football up there. And my coach who originally recruited me there had transferred after my freshman year to IUP. He had left and went took a job at IUP. And they had promoted our offensive coordinator to the head coaching job. Now, our offensive coordinator was a resident born and raised of Edinburgh University. So when I first got to Edinburgh, that's when I, we have white people say they've never seen a black person in person before. Mm-hmm. So I'm telling you this to say the offensive coordinator was promoted to the head coaching position, who didn't necessarily recruit some of the people that were on the team. So one day, me and a good friend of mine, we were college kids, so we kind of skipped out on something during spring ball. And, or we left early. And he calls us in the office. It was a group of us. And he tells me and one of my good friends who are from the Pittsburgh City type area, I guess you could say, he says, I think you guys would be more comfortable in more of an urban setting. Mm-hmm. So that's when it kind of hit me like, okay. That's when I was like, what are you trying to say? So, and that was his way to say, hey, you guys are from the city, you're black, you probably be doing better at a school that's more, and that was, to me, that was a sign of discrimination. And he never treated us the same after that, so, and I would later go on to hear other stories about him, but that was the first time that it smacked me in the face with Edinburgh, and also the way the police treated us up there. We were treated, like I said, I played ball up there. They used to pull me over and my guys in my car on campus and have the dogs sniff our whip, have us handcuffed on the sidewalk because they swore up and down we were selling drugs. So, and that was a regular thing for us up there, so.
So did you, after all of our experiences, did you find yourself moving a little different? Did you find yourself, questioning yourself? Was there something wrong with you?
I think that's the first, what we don't pay attention to is those type of interactions. When I say, let's use my college experience for example, most of us who come from non-traditional, like let's say we come from low-income families, there might be a lot of, issues within the family. You go to college, you go there because you want a better life, right? So, but you still got some of the bad habits that you've seen. So you're coming to college as a non-traditional college student because you don't have any structure, your parents never went to college, et cetera, et cetera. So when you go to school and you experience racism, you start forming your identity crisis now, right? Because it's like, hold on, I'm trying to get away from what they saying I'm supposed to be, but when I'm doing what right and trying to be in the right areas, I'm experiencing this type of treatment. Mm-hmm. And while I'm in college or in this area, I've been trying to conform to this culture. So I'm struggling with conforming. It's not that I don't want to, I'm trying to, but I'm also getting a feeling and being treated in a way to where it's like they don't want me to conform. So now you have an identity crisis.
Yeah.
So your homies back at the house are saying you different a little bit when you come back home. Then when you go to school, you ain't getting treated the same way like you want, like the college student you should be being treated as. And then now you're like, so who should I be? Sure, I'm about to just be who I was because at least I was accepted around the people that I'm comfortable with, you know? So you start to develop an identity crisis, and that's why a lot of boys and women who go to school, who come from some of our neighborhoods, don't succeed in this.
I think, and trust me, to the people who are watching, I don't come up with the total opposite. This is my life. I swear I don't do this, but I always find myself a little bit different than everybody else, which is good. But my first experience with racism that I felt was a racist behavior, I was at Ravenstein Middle School, AOAB, I think I'm playing, I was there, 6th grade, and a young lady behind me, Chanel Williams, if you're out there, look me up. But Chanel would pick on me because I was a lighter shade than she was. And she would say, you're not black, your features aren't black. I had a tail. You know, she would yank on my tail, and then I had a shag before a tail.
Oh,
she,
wow.
would,
Absolutely.
she would treat me like that because it made me feel like I wasn't black, you know, because I was a lighter shade. And she was just discriminating me because of my features and my hair. And so that disturbed me because we had, at the time, Ravenstein was a diverse school. We had whites and blacks. And so Buddy Johan was one friend of mine, Johan, blonde white kid, we were cool. You know, so I'm trying to figure out why does Chanel pick on me and Johan were cool, right? So after a period of time goes on, my mother gets remarried and I moved to Oakmont, town out, you know, out the way. And so I go to Oakmont, which is all white school. I'm the one of maybe 5 blacks in the school. And now the white kids are calling me nigger, right? And so they don't like me because I'm black. Like Chanel didn't like me because I was black, but Johan liked me, so I'm confused, right? So after high school, I didn't like white people. I wanted to go be around my people who I felt I looked like. So I go to Virginia State University, HBCU. I get to HBCU, just like you said, I get down there and I'm getting in where I fit in, but I'm educated because I graduated from the white high school. So they're like, you're not a type, you're not a write, you're not a talk. And they're like, where are you from? I'm like, I just left a bunch of white boys who want to hang me, and now here y'all are teasing me because I have an education. And so, you know, I always had a hard time fitting in based on color of my skin. And so, you know, once I realized that, I kind of just was, you know, I'm going to treat people like people. You know, I'm going to treat you like a man, I'm going to treat you like a woman, and I'm going to treat you how I see you. In your character and your content. And so when I raised my son, and I tell people, we had this conversation before, I wasn't intentionally raising a black man. I was raising a man. And so I left the color barriers out of it because for me, the colors were just confusing because I couldn't land where I wanted to land. There was a time my grandfather was white. He was Italian and black from what I was told. And he had me clean. He was a military guy, raised 5 kids by himself in Homewood, the same house, and he had me sweeping the floor one day, and I swept the floor, and I was, you know, being lazy about it. And so he grabbed the broom and dustpan, and he swept it, and he threw it back on the floor. He said, now, nigger boy, do it the right way. So here it is again. I'm like, well, hold up, we family? Because he called me a nigger boy, right? And maybe that's what he referred to lazy black men, nigger boys. So I go to my mom and said, Mom, Grandpa white, because called me a nigger, you know what I mean? So it was just hard, you know. So when I raised my son, like I said, I raised a man. I didn't say, hey, you know, son, there's going to be black and white issues. There's going to be issues. Right. And despite who throws them your way, you have to handle them. And so I never really, you know, got caught up in that. But it was just, you know, kind of confusing for me for a while.
Well, you know, that's a perfect segue into what we want to talk about. Like, how do we prepare our kids for, you know, the racism that we know is out there? But like you said, you was experiencing racism from your own race.
Right.
And so it caused you to be confused and not really know who to connect to. So, and you said you raised your son as a man. So what if, has he had any racist things happen to him, and was he confused? How did you guys deal with that?
You know, my son never spoke about a racial issue to me. He's never he never came to me and said, "Dad, this happened, this occurred." You know, and my son, he attended and graduated from Shadyside Academy, which we know is predominantly white, wealthy, upper class school. He did extremely well there. Went to Ohio State University, did extremely well there. So I believe that my parenting, based off of my experience, and I didn't want to set racial hurdles before him and say, the white man's going to do this, because what happens when the black man do it?
Right.
Now he's going to be like, "Dad, you didn't tell me the black man was going to do it. You said the white man was going to do it." And so I just said, you know, when you go through life, you know, the world is diverse.
Yeah.
You know, when I came out of HBCU, I was so used to the Black Connect that I was looking for the Black Connect and I couldn't find it. So I'm going to interviews like, "What's up, brother? You know, we brothers, right?" And they're like, "No." You know, so the HBCU didn't quite prepare me for the diversity. So when my son was growing up, I didn't steer him towards the HBCU, which was no other experience like the HBCU. But his education, his personality, his character, his content spoke different. It was diverse. And so, you know, my son is half Korean, so I had to make sure he was, you know, well prepared for diversity. You know, corporate America is diverse. The world is diverse, so I prepared him for diversity.
So I think it's great to prepare children for diversity. I also think that we have to prepare children for the potential hurt that comes with racism, right? I'm wearing a shirt today that says racism hurts, because it does. I also believe that we have to talk about identifying race, right? Like, well, if we were to say, you know, we're going to sort of create a premise of like being colorblind, like that's not real, because children ultimately will have an experience where they'll identify differences and they'll be identified potentially as different. What we can do is offer them experiences and offer a rich dialogue about the differences, right, of different nationalities, different races. And so in that, I believe we would sort of set the stage for children to be able to ask us questions and for us to filter questions and vet questions that they might have based on their experiences.
Yeah, you know, I think that, you know, very interesting conversation, very interesting concept, because I believe that you can't prepare your children with specifics. You can't, because as soon as you say this is going to happen,
That's what they look for.
that's what they're looking for. So I also agree. I think one of the things that we struggle as and blacks as us is that we got to make sure that we're not being hypocritical, because then the kids get taught something strange too. You know, I think that one of the things that's being caught up is that don't prepare your kids to see a particular race a certain way. Prepare them to stand in their own space. Prepare them to be righteous, do what they're supposed to do. And when things come, you know, do what you're supposed to do. My father was an activist in the 60s. You know, he was one of them. You know, I had my uncles used to come and they used to bring the Bible and the Quran, and they used to talk about this and that. And I understood. I remember being young and being taught, you know, what black men were supposed to be doing. However, it didn't prepare me for the gambit. It prepared me for certain things. One of the things I think that we should be teaching our kids is teaching them, present all things to them. Present it to them, teach them what is right, what you're supposed to do, how you're supposed to behave, because this world is big. This world is big, and I think one of the mistakes that happens is that we kind of teach our kids to learn how to feel, to live in a small space.
Live in Pittsburgh, man.
Like we teach them, even if wherever it's at, we teach them whatever space we're
state
in,
of mind.
wherever they're at, we teach them that space. And then there's always going to be there's always going to be shock. Like, you know, the gentleman, when he went away to college, there was shock. When if he goes to another city, he's going to be shocked. And so we have a tendency to teach a small space. And I think the best way to do it is to kind of teach them there's other things in this world. You know, there's other experiences, good and bad. And I think that we have a tendency to keep them from the truth. Teach them everything, show them everything. And I think that's what my father did. He told me everything. One of the things when you brought up earlier, one of the things that he used to tell me is that he appreciated. Let me see how he used to say it. I appreciate the way that I'm treated racially now compared to then. And I said, what do you mean by that? He was like, when I grew up, they stabbed you in the back. Now they stab you in the chest.
I'd rather the chest.
I'd rather the chest because I can see you coming.
Right.
And he says, but you can learn from that. See, when you get stabbed in the back, there's no lesson. And he used to say that all the time. And I'm like, man. But he said, but there's, my father also had a white best friend. So he's the kind of, we had some. He always gave me all the experiences he could, and I think that's the secret. Just give them as many experiences as they could. There are no good blacks and bad blacks and good whites, bad blacks. Man, people be tripping. Like people.
Well, let me ask you. So, okay, I'm feeling y'all, but what about the systems set in place?
I think we talk about history and tell the truth.
Specifically,
if you tell the truth and talk about, so it has to be a hybrid of what you talk about. Like sometimes, like we talk off camera about this topic, but it's like it has to be a middle ground. When we talk about politics, that's why the government is functioning the way it's functioning. There's no bipartisanism. It's just you're with your party, I'm with my party. So when we're talking about how do we present this to our kids and prepare them for it, it's providing them with as many worldly experiences as possible and being as transparent as possible, but also not being, and I think sometimes when we go back and forth, you're afraid of that bias piece to kick in, and where it's like, this is how these people are going to treat you, and we got to steer away from that also. Like you said, human beings be tripping. And at the end of the day, black people got self-hate because of many reasons. Right. You know what I'm saying? So what you experienced was black self-hate, because how you experience being picked on as a light-skinned kid. I remember being a dark-skinned kid, and no girl ever wanted to talk to me because I was dark-skinned. I grew up in the 80s. Yeah, in the 80s, Al B. Shore and all them was hot. So I wasn't getting talked to. You understand what I'm saying? And they would say, because I'm dark-skinned. You understand what I'm saying? So that's self-hate stuff that was taught to us through a system. You know what I'm saying? So I think we have to be as and where we lack, and this is the challenge to go about, not just teaching them about where we are. Think about it. A lot of us haven't traveled outside of our space. So it's hard for me to introduce you to different cultures and things of that nature when I haven't even traveled and tapped into. Now, there's less excuses for it because of the technology we have now. You can do a lot of things via your phone or whatever. You ain't got to physically be there to experience the culture. So I think, be transparent. To me, history, you have to teach your kids history. American history, African history, but you have to teach them the history and teach it in its totality. So if we're going to talk about slavery, don't just talk about slavery and how, we were treated just as slaves. You could talk about the wins that we had during slavery. We could talk about the Haitian rebellion and things of that nature. You could talk about all of the different contributions slaves made during that time and that we didn't necessarily lay down, And then you could talk about, and then we could talk about the whole thing. Every major empire and every culture had slaves. Their slaves were just treated differently. So in the continent of Africa, we had slaves, but they were treated differently. You were able to be married as a slave. You were able to go back home the next day. You weren't being treated, tortured. But there were different, those are just social classes to an extent, to be honest with you. So being transparent and saying, hey, people trip. So you're going to experience colorism from your own people. You're going to experience racism from other people, but that doesn't mean everybody's going to be that way. As you said, one of my best friends, and who I call brother, and his siblings, my brothers, is white, and they adopted me at one point. I lived with them, and his mother was legally my mother, and she lived in Swissville, and her name is Miss Mary. I call her mom to this day. You know what I'm saying? When we was getting kicked out of our house, everybody went to Miss Mary's crib and ate, stayed the night. It wasn't no problem. And she would chastise you too, but nobody had no problem with it because it was a cult. She was just in our culture, and it wasn't. But there's going to be people who might live next door to Miss Mary who's white that feel a totally different way. But I can't neglect that part from my child, because when my child bumps into somebody, they're going to assume that they're all Miss Mary, and they're not, and that could devastate them. And now when I go to tell them something, you upset with me because I didn't expose you, or at least provide you with this type of information to let you know that this could possibly happen. So transparency to me is the key. In history, you have to tell them about history. These things have happened. These things are still happening. These things we're gradually getting away from these things, but there's still systems in place, but don't use them as an excuse.
One of the things, absolutely well spoken, and the thing is that I remember Dr. Burnett, she used to be the principal at Westinghouse, and she came to Iman and she was in the lead, and she used to say, tell kids what they need to know. They can handle it. And I think that's something that we don't do well.
Nope.
Like, we kind of hold things back from them, and then they experience it in life and go, "What? We should have told them."
Right.
Well, like, we expose kids right now to some of the craziest things. Like, we'll show them stupid stuff, but then we won't expose them to the tough conversations.
Right.
So so I think that's one of the
Because why though? We're uncomfortable.
because we're uncomfortable.
It ain't even about the kids.
We
It's
uncomfortable.
like
How do you present this to them without
Right.
exposing too much or twisting whatever thought they got?
For 30 years, Healthy Starts has been making sure that babies in Allegheny County reach their first birthday. Did you know that Healthy Start not only supports the mother and child, but we are here to support fathers as well? Here at Healthy Starts, we know and appreciate that fathers play a very important, necessary role in their child's early development. We have the support fathers need to understand and engage for a healthy pregnancy as well as the early development of your child. But that starts with taking care of you. If you have a partner who is pregnant, let us support you both through this life-changing journey. Reach out.
For more information on our fatherhood programs, please contact WeTalkingFatherhood@gmail.com.
I don't have a black card.
Right. That's right.
I got a man card.
Like, I mean, you know, what does it mean to have a black card?
Right. I think
Like,
that
where can you get access?
what that does is it keeps people in a mindset of outside of the box, because being a black, there's things that go along with having a black card. So as a father, and then you have your peers around you, you want to maintain the black card. How does that affect your parenting? You know,
But it's about your knowledge though. When we talk about the black card, you talking about most of the things y'all feel like, will we agree if we say that most of the things people bring up is irrelevant things, or that you would say you should be on your black card, on your checklist, if we talk about movies and stuff like that. But it's about your knowledge. Your black card is knowing that the inventor of the super soaker is African American. Because now I could do something that you might think is weird and ain't for black people, and I can say, what are you talking about though? Do you know the aerospace guy that made super soakers is African American? Do you know that the first person that actually, you know what I'm saying, went to Antarctica, stepped foot on it is African American? Now we changing what the narrative is of what it means to have a black card. The black card is anything, because at the end of the day, you can do whatever, but it's about knowledge. So when you raising your kids, don't expose them to the superficial surface level black information. Let's dig, because when you dig, that's when you start finding out the cool stuff. Oh, a black guy helped design the assembly line for Ford Motors. Y'all don't even know. Things like, so we now, the black card is everything is on the table. Jordan could be on the table, but also being an aerospace scientist is on the table too. You know what I'm saying? But it's exposure, 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 exposure. And now we're changing the narrative of what it is to be a black man or a woman.
I think that the black card conversation is less about pop culture, as it should be more about loving thyself. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's a lot of blacks who run around who have a lot of self-hate. And I think that's the really only way that you can lose your black card. Like, if you cannot stand your own culture, if you hate it, you refuse to be part of it, that's how you lose your black card. Because, you know, we used to make this joke, because in college, you know, I grew up, you know, I was at IUP. I went to IUP. And so, you know, and at IUP, this is in the late 90s, and we're watching Seinfeld and Friends every day. Every day. That's how we ended our night, watching Seinfeld and Friends. Now, in the context, that would make me lose my black card if that's my favorite show. But that's not what made me black. What made me black is that when black issues hit the table, who was I fighting for? Who was I standing for? Who was I willing who was I willing to educate? When I raise my children, what do I tell them about? What's my stance when it comes to me being part of this black culture? And I think that's what we should stand on. Quit worrying about the pop culture things and worry more about how we love ourselves as parts of the black community. You know, and just like you said, acknowledge it. Acknowledge your blackness. But I also think there's a, you know, as someone from a mixed race, you should not feel no way about acknowledging all parts of you. Acknowledge all parts of you, and I think that's the mistake we make because we don't. You gotta acknowledge all our parts.
You have a lot of people say your dad is black, you black.
Oh yeah, but I don't tell people that.
I will not disregard my mom's side of the family, which is Hispanic.
Absolutely.
And so I don't fall into black is black. You know what I mean? So in raising my son who is, you know, biracial, I have to consider not just being black, but being, because they're called, and so for me, cultural competency is the word I like to use. And that's understanding different cultures and what you can expect from them, not necessarily you're going to come into that, but this culture behaves like this culture behaves like that. A lot of times what you find for fathers is understanding different cultures and allowing our children to maybe accept another culture than what we're bringing them up in. You know, so, you know, my sister used to tease me because I talked to white girls. Well, she was like a pro-black, you know, angry black. My sister was, you know, so, but guess who's dating white girls now? My nephew. Right? So, you know what I mean? So, allow them to venture off into other cultures. It's okay. You know, some people say, "Well, bring no white girl home to my house." They tell their kids, "Don't bring no white dude home."
I mean, it's kind of hard to do that now because, like, you know, I got a 21-year-old, I got a 16, 14, I got a 7-year-old daughter. So, you know, when I'm in the schools now, even when my 14-year-old was in the schools, they really don't see black and white like that, right? So it's like, you know, I always talk to my daughter about her little dolls, and I'm like, well, you want to get some black dolls? She's like, well, they're just, it doesn't matter what color, Daddy. And so, you know, I didn't teach her that, but reality is, at some point, it's going to be about color. So for me, I struggle with like forcing that conversation on her when she's not even, she don't even, she's like, my best friend's white and my best doll's black and white and my car's pink. So like, she considers all that one. And so how do, again, even for me, how do I get to prepare her for some of the things? Not to say that she's even going to experience that, because I mean the tide has turned as far as, you know, there's this big push for the women, you know, because the women are doing some great things. They've been doing great things, but it's really like in the atmosphere now. So she may not experience some of those things, but
our talks are going to be different now. Like, think about it. How old is she now?
She's 7.
So think about this. My daughter's 8. So 10 years from now, like you said, like, they're going to school, our kids might be going to school, and the way we talk about race is going to be totally, they're going to be like, what are you talking? We're going to sound like 1950s. Yeah, on them, like, we're not on that no more, yo.
Right.
Now, it's there, but the majority of these young kids, especially like when we talk about this last 4 years and what's been going on, the blessing behind if you voted for Trump or not was everything got brought to the forefront. People were starting to voice how they really felt explicitly. They started to act on those things, black, white, or whatever, you know? So that was a blessing to me, because now the young kids coming up who are naive to this are like, whoa, this is going on, and they got a problem with it. Like when I went to the protest that we had in Pittsburgh, I tell people all the time, 15% were black. Everybody else was white out there. Like, so it's like, regardless for whatever reason they were out there for, we wasn't out there as much as they were out there, and the issue was about black people. So it was like, that was encouraging to an extent, because they like, young whites is like, hold the phone. That's right. We thought y'all was complaining and stuff like that, because they're not dealing with the culture to which we have to deal with, the police in the same way, systematic oppression in the same way, and things. And it's not being taught in the school. As a history teacher, we're not telling our kids about systematic oppression. We're not telling them about these type of things. So when it actually is coming to the forefront as reality, they're upset. because we've been painting them this picture all this time that America's equal opportunity and great. And if you're complaining, it's because you're not working hard enough. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps and let's go. So hopefully, you know, as we can see, like, our kids, by the time our kids is 18, we like, look, this is what, man, we're not even on that no more. And if we see it, my girl Cheryl over here, who might be a different race, is going to check them for that stuff. And that's the key, like, you know, as much as we got to have this conversation with our kids, white people got to have this conversation. We talking about black people. White people have to have this conversation, because if we talk about systematic oppression and hierarchies, white people are the ones who are in position to make the biggest change. Because if I call out, think about it. We talk about how we treat each other as black men, right? If I'm looked at as the dopest black dude in my neighborhood, right? And I see somebody disrespect someone on some sucker disrespect, like he didn't even have to do that, and I walk over and be like, yo, bang, 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 why would you do that? Blah, blah, blah. But it was just about how we should be treating each other, and other people see that and like, hold on, you seen such and such go over there? So we ain't gotta act like that. If he's acting like that, that means we don't gotta act like that. So when white people have these conversations with their kids, they say, hey, guess what? Other races go through things that you don't have to deal with. I just want you to know, if you see this happen, it's not okay. That's right. You see your friend such and such that you kick it with, that's your friend regardless of their skin color. Don't feel uncomfortable if someone who looks like you treats them a certain way and it makes you feel a certain way, you speak up for them. And that's what has to happen. So it's not only a conversation within a black household, it has to be a conversation within a white household, because they have to hold themselves accountable as well, just like we got to hold ourselves accountable. And it's a big impact if they do it, because systematically things will start to change and things will become taboo. So when a black person walk into a certain restaurant dressed a certain way and they don't have a dress code, and a white person see they being treated differently because of it, they might stand up and say, yo, hold the phone, you don't have a dress code, my G. All right, well, we'll never come in here and eat again since you're treating people that way. Boom! You're changing the system by doing that. But white people have to take the same accountability as we do, so we can move forward with it. And then it might not ever have to be a conversation that we really have to have with our kids. And we could talk and say, the United States is really a melting pot, you know, and function how it's supposed to.
When you say take accountability, what does that mean? Because I got white friends that's like, Juan, I didn't do it.
Yeah.
Right? And
that's not taking accountability. Well, you gotta go with this. What's the saying? If you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. If I know this is going on, think about it. If I know this is happening, and this is where I understand if I was a white person, it's like, well, where do I start? I'm only one person, how do I help? Like, so it's like, I didn't do it, where do I start? You know, I don't know am I supposed to donate part of my check? No, it's really about, and I had friends of mine call me, white friends of mine call me and say, what do I do? And it's just like, all I said was this. Be a genuine individual. I said, from what I know, you're a good dude. If you're a good dude, be that guy and stand on that. And when you see, and this is where I think the issue becomes within their group, their race is, I got uncles and cousins. I just had this conversation on campus with one of our Penn State IT guys. He tried to slide, and we was talking about race, and he was a good dude, good guy. Yeah, my granddad is kind of racist. I had to stop him. I said, no, your granddad is a racist. I said, there's no such thing as kind of racist, bro. You know, but he had to say it like that because that's his granddad who he loves. So he loves his granddad. It's hard to acknowledge. Yeah, but I had to make him acknowledge. And he said, you know what, you're right, he is racist. Because you want to know why? The accountability piece is not letting kind of racist, because when your granddad's calling people N-words or treating people a certain way, you're sitting back and allowing it. Check your granddad. Hey, granddad, hey, I don't function like that. I'm not cool with that. I got friends that's African American or from another race. I don't function that way. Your granddad as a grown man is going to feel this big, and he's going to self-reflect. And ain't even disrespect. So the accountability piece is holding each other accountable. And if you're going to sit up here and say you're not a racist, a bigot, or a prejudiced individual, walk that creed. Just like if you're a Christian, walk that creed. If you're a Muslim, walk that creed. And a lot of times, white people don't want to walk that creed because it'll take, you're afraid. It's almost like when they try to impeach Trump, you needed 17 Republicans to go with that. Why? You don't think most of them didn't think he was dead wrong? They did. But if I vote against them, the rest of my party gonna have me out here like this. So as a white individual, if most of my family function a certain way, or my friends say some slick stuff, and I've grown up with them since I've been a yay high, and I say something, now I might alienate myself. I love you, Juan, but you know, I would never do that, but you're still allowing this to persist. Exactly. And I always say, hey, Trump showed everything he is. I mean, his history say what it was. You know, he's sued by the Justice Department for racism multiple times, over 10 to 12 times, so before he was the president. So it's like, I don't gotta assume you're racist.
He's just kind of
You're or prejudiced. And I don't even want to go racist, let's say prejudice. But at the end of the day, every person that didn't vote, that voted for Trump isn't a racist, but racism isn't a problem, isn't a big deal to you, is what I say. You might not be a racist, but it's not a big deal to you.
It's okay.
That's it.
Well, before you jump in, I think one of the things that makes that point so valid is that it's really a numbers game. Like, that's the thing, especially in Pittsburgh. We're 13%. Like, 13% of the African American, that's all we are. And so we do need allies to even make anything move the needle. So that's a conversation that we don't have enough, because even if we all stand together, we can still be outvoted. The propaganda can still go a certain way. So we do need other races to stand with us if change is going to happen. And I know a lot of people don't like to hear that. So, like, there are people watching this right now, they're going to say, blacks shouldn't be depending on it's a numbers game right now. Of course, we have to do what we're supposed to do. But it is a numbers game. It is a numbers game. And so we have to find allies that are willing to open their eyes and open their minds and see the truth for anything to go to really change. And that's just, that's the real deal.
Would you bite in to say, bro?
I mean, for me, what if the white people didn't have these conversations? And what if they didn't want to be an ally? Then what do we do?
They don't already.
I'm just saying,
that's already been going on.
I mean, we can't worry about that.
Because at this point in our life, why does it depend on what someone else is going to do for you to succeed?
Because you're a power.
No one's saying that though. You took it in and all.
No, I'm just saying, because we say, well, Trump's out of this, and Trump is a racist or not a racist. Biden, no one remembers when Biden made
We know about all that.
So whether Trump or Biden's in the office, it doesn't benefit nobody.
Neither one's the same.
Right. So what do we do as fathers, as men, to move the needle? So whether this culture or this culture is going to be our ally, we need to focus on how do we move the needle if the white don't want to go, if the Asian don't want to go, if the Jewish don't want to go, if the blacks don't want to go.
Right. Well, we got to keep fighting for ourselves.
Right. And that's what accountability is about. It's about you are the man of your house. You determine which way your house is going to go. What resource you need is going to be up to you, and how you acquire that resource is going to be up to you. You can say we're at a disadvantage because we're black. I don't agree with that.
So bro, here's what I'm gonna say though. It's becoming a human game. It's becoming a human game though. If we sit and reflect and think about events that occurred, right? So, Tree of Life, Antoine Rose, right? There has certainly been some convergence of people, because human life, from my perspective, is becoming devalued on a lot of different hands. And so that, for me, is going to be the unifying factor. Human life, no matter what background you come from, right? Human life. We all bleed the same. And so a numbers game may be part of it, but it's really ultimately becoming a human game, because if places and spaces with people become unsafe, and in the human life become devalued, at what point do all of us say, we're going to have to work this out for the collective, right? Because the hate piece, does it place greater value on life, generally speaking, right? Or does it devalue life? I'm going to say the hate piece devalues life in general. And so, I mean, we may not see it. I think Vaughn made a good point. Like, I might talk to I have a daughter, she's like 1.5. I might be talking to her in like 15, 16 years, and she'd be like, that's not even where we're at. That race piece ain't even, look, Pops, we talking about a whole, I can't even dream it up, but we talking about something else that's different. But if it's centered around hate, we'll continue to have the cyclical societal problems that we're facing, right? And I mean, the other sort of piece of this, and this isn't a conversation for tonight, is our health as parents. So as fathers specifically, how's this impacting us, right? If I were Antoine Rose's father, how would I feel, right? And I'm just saying that to say, so that if I was Antoine Rose's father and I was like, hey, how many fathers can I get to stand with me? We're going downtown, we're protesting. We're going to a municipal building, we're protesting. We're taking it to Harrisburg, we're protesting. And we're going to DC, we're protesting because my child's life was lost at the hands of what? Based on what? Everything we're talking about, right? Systems, racism, etc. You know? I mean, and again, to me, it's the human game.
I think it's tough. I think that's tough. It's a tough statement because I agree that it is our responsibility. I totally agree. Like, we have a responsibility to fight for ourselves. We're responsible to do what is necessary to pull ourselves up. But I remember there's a quote, I don't know if it was Malcolm or some activist, he was like, they're telling us to pull ourselves up out of bootstraps, but we ain't got no boots. And it's because, you know, if the system has, if, you know, oppression is real. Let's not, the conversation cannot start with there is no oppression. The oppression is real. Racism is real. It's a numbers game, like I said. It's real. We're still the minority. And so therefore, for equality and equity, because equity is a whole other conversation. Because equity is giving us what we require, not the same. Equity is step 3 for real, because we haven't even got equality yet. And so that's a real conversation. And so whenever I hear someone, you know, say that, you know, we got to do it ourselves, you're right. We have a responsibility, but we're still the least loaned. We still get the least business loans. We still get the realty is still sold to other people. We still own the least amount of businesses. We still got the most incarcerated. We still get we get the least services for mental illness and health. This happens systematically. So, yes, we have a responsibility, but others have a responsibility also.
Like this, man. At the end of the day, if we had the equality piece, there's no excuse. You're right. Every black person should be on point. Now, I don't know if you feel like we are treated all equally here in the United States, but if we're being real, there's no country in the world where there is equality across the board. Every country has some form of oppression, including the United States.
There's a class system.
In the United States, oppression is heavy here. You can see the wealth gap is getting bigger and bigger to where you're not even about to have a middle class. You're either poor or you're rich. And that's by design. It's not on accident. So at the end of the day, there's definitely an oppression piece there. If the equality was there, I don't know how, if we want to say pull it yourself, I'm a firm believer in that. I got your fraternity's tattoo on me to poem excuses because I don't believe in them. But I'm a realist, and I do understand there is a such thing as an oppression, and I've also had the opportunity to bump heads with it a couple times, to an extent. So with that being said, if the equality piece was there, like you said, cool. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps, my G, because everyone here has equal opportunity. But that's not the truth when, like you said, we're the smallest population, but we're the most incarcerated. That doesn't even make sense in itself. And like you said, when we talk about business loans, then we could go all the way down that road. And even, so it's just like there's a lot of things that go, but one thing is not all black people experience the same level of oppression or discrimination. So my level of discrimination and experience with that might be different from yours. Like my son is lighter than you. He looks nuts, skin lighter than me. So me and him are gonna have conversations about race, but he might not even never experience some of the discrimination that I might have received from my own people or from other people. Because you wanna know what? When I walk into the room with tattoos and I'm dark skinned with a deep voice, white people be scared of me most of the time. In my work professional area, white people are afraid of me. I know this for a fact. I've had it been said, but I say
black men are afraid of you too.
But my point is this. Now, my son, who's a light-skinned guy, huge smile, I don't know what his character is going to be as he grow up, but his demeanor may be totally different to me, and he might not have to experience a lot of those things. He might be more welcomed in a room and things of that nature. I have to make people comfortable first to let them know that it's okay. You know, so it just
have to make black men
different.
comfortable too, because it's your demeanor isn't racially laser. It's just who you are. So a weak man, whether white or black, or intimidated man, white or black, is going to say, "Whoa, this dude is dark skinned."
I think it's
like
different sometimes. The skin tone matters. Your skin stats show that the skin tone matters. A darker man coming into the room, you're more looked at as a threat. And that even goes back to how they view when we go to slavery. That's why there was house N-words and outside N-words.
And that's why it exists today. That's why it exists today, because we were so adamant about making reference to it, that it exists today, because we kept saying, "You a house nigga, you a film nigga,
but listen,
you a house." And so now we have reinvented,
but no, right? What you're missing is it manifested. It went from being a.
We brought it here.
Listen, it
I
manifested.
didn't tell my son he was going to be a light, he was going to be a house nigga. He don't even know.
Listen, it manifests. So at the end of the day, you're right. It is different now. So, but it manifests as something different. So like house ends and the outside ends. People that work in the house were lighter, fairer skin, or whatever the case may be. But it manifests into the workforce, dog. That stuff manifests. But we didn't make that manifest because we can't. We don't control the system.
I just shared with you my first experience with racism. That is equal to the house and field slave, right? So someone went back and said, "You know, you're light skinned, you're going to be," and we kept digging it up and digging it up and bringing it and bringing it. We brought the past so far into the future that we're back in the past again. That's why we're still saying the first black such and such. Because we keep going back and saying, "This is who you are."
Who controls the media?
And so then we bring it into our future. Son, I want to tell you about, and we bring it back into our future. And so now we reincarnated slavery again, which makes the 13th Amendment TV show relevant, because we didn't brought it all into our future.
So did we create the system that incarcerates people, yes or no?
No.
So how could we have brought the system?
Because we valued it so much that it was part of history has become our present. How
you can't know where you're going without history.
We go back and we bring it with us. We can't take these ideologies, these behaviors, these mindsets into our present.
The United States history is so. This is why you got to look. I'm about to tell you why you have to do it. Because the history that we've all learned about the United States was false. So now you have to go back, read, tread, and dig it up so you can get the facts. Because everything you've learned in school is a lie. And I'm going to tell you that as a teacher.
Speculation.
No, I'm a teacher. How you going to tell me that's speculation, bro?
You learned the same thing and you're reteaching it.
No, I'm not. That's why I was a teacher, bro. You're telling me what I did.
You teach African history?
I taught social studies.
So the fact remains, the education that you
don't know what you're talking about right now.
Is the same.
That's what I'm about to tell you.
That's not even right, though.
Sound right or wrong.
The bottom line is, I learned what you learned, but when I became a teacher and was able to teach, I rewrote the curriculum. So I didn't teach our kids what you learned. And that curriculum,
you teach them what you want to teach.
No, I taught them the information that they gave us.
Curriculum is yours.
Okay.
It's yours.
It's African history and American history. I took it out the book.
You rewrote it.
Who wrote the book?
You took it out the book?
Some of those, yes. So we got books.
What book?
And y'all took books from everywhere.
That was rewritten and rewritten.
I can say that about your Bible.
Exactly.
So why do you follow it?
That's why you don't.
So why do you follow it? Why do you believe it if it was rewritten? You don't even know who wrote it.
Right, so you won't believe the Bible.
You don't even know who wrote it.
The history.
You don't know who wrote the Bible, bro.
All right, this is where we go on 5 seconds. I want to get words from Brandon.
So shout out to everybody for having a wonderful dialogue this evening. I did bring a book with me I think would be great for all fathers to have. Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria by none other than Dr. Beverly Daniel Tatum. Just explores some of the things that you are talking about, right? And some of the conversations our children may have had at Reisenstein, have had at Edinburgh, have had at Clarion, have had at Imani, have had at IUP, have had in the community, like what they're experiencing based on, you know, the color of their skin. So I appreciate it. It's been a real vibrant conversation tonight.
Is your book a resource or a source?
Both. Both.
So this is your source and your resource.
Both, yes,
Okay.
sir. Yes, sir. Because within this, Dr. Tatum references numerous. I have to go to see how many references are in here, but I'm going to guesstimate probably well over 100. Let's just see where we can go. Oh, we're in the 190s. Okay, 217 references, right? And so that's why I said it's a resource, right? And a source. Because all these references here are amazing. One of the things about me, my experience is amazing. I've sort of experienced many different places and spaces. So what I trust that will occur, though, is that for forefathers and from fathers, there'll be honorable achievement for all humans, right? It's a human game. It's a human game. If we're going to make this, if we all going to survive, it's got to be a human game.
Right, I agree.
Give us some thoughts on how fathers can educate their children in this new climate without really, pushing racism down their throat, kind of using some of everybody's experiences to tell the story. On you, my brother.
Listen, let me just say this, because I think one of the things that the mistake that we make, and let me just throw it out there. When you have conversations like this and dialogues like this, one of the mistakes we make is that I literally was just watching the 10 mistakes men make. I was just watching it just before this started. And one of the things that happens is that we have a tendency to engage in a conversation to respond, and never in a conversation to understand. And it is the biggest mistake we make. We do this with our spouses. We do this with our friends. We do this in panels. So someone is speaking and we're listening so that we're double dutching. They're speaking so that we can jump in, and there's never any understanding. And the truth is, everybody has their own personal experiences that dictates their thought process, their thinking. One, don't be afraid of that. You have your own experiences. You have your own things that good and bad. And when you said that we're not talking about right and wrong, well, there is a right and wrong. Like, we all have to take responsibility for our wrong thinking and our right thinking, and the willingness to get into it. Because there's some things that, because of your experiences, you said that it warped your thinking. You got to be willing to say, yes, I got some warped thinking. Also, I got to be willing to say, I'm looking for understanding. And I think that's the mistake we make. We don't look for understanding. And so when it comes down to making this thing work, man, we got to search understanding. We got to be willing to say, this is how I feel, this is what I believe, but now let me be open to what is the truth. Not your truth, not my truth, the truth. And because it's out there, the truth is out there. And the things that were spoken today, I agree with a lot of things that are spoken on both sides. But the truth is, we got to know what reality is. We got to know how we feel about it. And then we got to say, what am I willing to compromise? Like, what thinking do I have that I know is incorrect? And what thing do I need to do to lay aside so that there's a solution that needs to come? Because one of the things that we need to do, men have power. The black community has power. We can speak things into existence. We can make things happen if we gain understanding. If we gain understanding. And so that's how I feel that, that's where my heart is at right now. We need to make sure that we're in dialogue, because I want more dialogues like this with more people, with more different, with different education levels and more cultures involved, because understanding is the answer.
It is. And it's about your intent.
Y'all know what they say about understanding, right? You can only find it if you find the truth. And so the truth is, we talking fatherhood, and we will catch y'all on the next show.
We're talking fatherhood.
Yeah, you see a bus and he move. Right. We got a whole lot to gain and we ain't got nothing to lose. Yeah, we done all took losses, now we just get W.